Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ayin Beis, Daf 72 of Masechta Yoma. No, what does Daf 72 talk about? Who could tell me? We continue with our discussion from yesterday, the different threads that make up the different garments of the Kohen Gadol, the different numbers of threads, so a little bit numbery. And then we kind of shift into some interesting agadatas towards the end, about Talmidei Chachamim and things like that. We learn about the dimensions of the Aron, some interesting, just kind of technical things. We're going to start on Daf Ayin Aleph Mud Beis, I think, all the way at the bottom, yeah. Daf Ayin Aleph Mud Beis, last line of the page, Me'il Shneim Aser. So the Me'il of the Kohen Gadol, the, what do you call all these things? Is this a tunic? What's a tunic? I don't know. Basically, the Kohen Gadol had this thing that he would wear, and I think it was made out of turquoise. It was called the me'il. On the bottom was where you had the bells and the pomegranates. Shnei Maser. So each thread in the me'il was 12 threads. It was basically 2 threads, each one of which was made up of 6 sub-threads. Minol, how do you know this? As the pasuk says, "Basisa es me'il ephod." So you make the me'il. Klil tcheles. So now, as Rashi says, klil means gedil, like a thread, and a thread is at least 2. Right? A thread needs to. It's not just like one string; it's like 2 kind of wrapped together. And we know that the me'il, it says that it was made out of. No, well, does it say sheish? It probably says like. Does it say sheish over there? What does it say? Where am I? Zion. Basisas me'il ephod klil tcheles. Oh. Okay, but each of the threads was made up of, here it is. No, that's like the whole point. But he says me'il ephod, so klil tcheles. The puzzle says, so it's made out of tcheles, turquoise, and it says klil. Now, klil is a gedil, as Rashi says, and a gedil is at least 2 threads that are wound together. Now, here's the thing. And then we make a gzer shav of tcheles from paroches, malhol, and shisha, afkan shisha. And just like by the paroches, each thread was made up of 6 sub-threads, so here also. So it's 6 times 2. There you go. V'nelaf mishulav v'rimonav, malhol, and shmona, afkan shmonas. Now, affect the Gemara, wait. But why don't you learn out the the me'il, the threads of the me'il, from the threads of the pomegranates that we learned, that are at the bottom of the me'il, and that we learned yesterday are 8 threads each. In which case this would be 16, right? 8 times 2 is 16? Yeah, rather than 6 times 2, which would be 12. Wow. Math. Doesn't kli mi kli, vein doesn't kli mi tachshit. Kli. So Gemara says, well, we'd prefer to learn out a kli from a kli, a vessel from a vessel, kilo, a garment from a garment, which is the me'il from the paroches, rather than the kli, i.e. the me'il, from a tachshit kli, from an adornment of a kli, i.e. the pomegranates that were at the bottom of the me'il. So therefore, we'd rather learn out the me'il from the paroches and say that it's 12 threads as opposed to the 16 that we would learn out from the pomegranates. But then the Gemara says, wait a second, but the pomegranates at the end of the day are at the bottom of the me'il. So the Gemara wants to suggest that it would be more sensible to learn out the me'il from the pomegranates that are at the bottom of the me'il and keep everything in-house, like in the me'il house, as opposed to learning out from the parochos, which is a completely under azach. It's a completely different thing. To which the Gemara says, well, this is precisely when we learned in the Brisa earlier that one of the times when it says sheish, it's referring to, right, that yesterday we learned this Brisa that says to all the other things where it doesn't specifically say sheish, they still have 6 threads. That is a reference to the me'il. That even though it doesn't specifically say sheish in the context of the me'il, nonetheless it has 6 threads. Not 8. And then 6 times 2 is 12. Dalid, where am I? Paroches esun v'arba. So the paroches has 24 threads. Dalid d'shisa shisa. There are 4 types of wool in the paroches, and each one has 6 threads. 6 times 4, 24. Lodina v'lodayana, and there is nothing. There's no judgment, no judges. It's clear as day. there's no contesting this. It says in the pasuk the different materials. There are 4 of them. It also says sheish, which means that there are 6 threads. 6 times 4, 12. That is that. Choshen ve'ephod esim v'shmone. Now the choshen and the ephod, the apron, were 28 threads. Minolan. How do we know? Well, d'chsiv vasisa choshen mishpat maise choshev ki maise ephod taisenu. Okay, so you make the choshen like the ephod. Zav, okay, gold. Tcheles ve'argamon, turquoise wool, and argamon is, what was it, purple? Betulah shani v'sheish mashzar, red wool and linen. So we see that it's lemaisa 4 types of materials, and it says sheish mashzar, which means that each of the 4 types are going to have 6 threads each. So that's 24 already. But there's also gold. So arba d'shisa shisa esem arba. So the 4 types of materials times the 6 threads in each is 24. Zav arba. And then the gold, there was 1 thread of gold together with all the other types materials, right? So there were 4 materials, 6 threads each, and with each of the 4 materials there would be 1 thread of gold. So essentially you had 7 times 4 is 28. Ha esim v'tmanya, so that's 28. Ve'ema zav nami shisha b'fekti gemara. Wait, maybe I'll say lemaise that there were 6 gold ones, and therefore it's basically 6 times 5, which is 30. So Amar Ravacha bar Yaakov, Amar Kra v'kitzetz psilim. It says Ravacha bar Yaakov. Well, the pasuk says v'kitzetz psilim, psilim. That psilim is plural, right? Psil would be singular, psilim is plural. And it says v'kitzetz, that you cut them in half. So if you have psilim, which is plural, so 2 threads of gold, and you're cutting each one in half, so that lemaisa creates 4 threads of gold. So Hare Kandalad. So there's your 4. So there's 4 threads of gold. So you have 4 materials, 6 threads in each of them. That's 24. And then an additional 4 threads of gold. That's 28. Weiter. Rashi Amar, Rashi Ad Gizak. Amar Kra, that the pasuk says, Lasus b'soch atcheles b'soch hargaman. It says in the context of the gold that you're going to put the gold together with the tcheles and the argaman and the tulashani and the sheish, right? So meaning, so you're going to be putting the gold together, mixed together, bundled together with the other 4 materials. Now, heichinavid. So if we were to have 6 golden threads, how would that work out, right? Because we wanted to suggest, right, that, well, maybe there's 6 golden threads, not 4. So Rav Ashi is like, but just mathematically speaking, how would that work out? Because it says that you would have gold together with each of the other 4 materials. So Naivid Arba'a de Trey have Lutmanya. Well, if together, if bundled together with each of the 4 materials, there would be 2 threads of gold, well then that would be 8 additional threads, not 6. Then, right, Naivid Trey de Vitray de Chad. And if we say, well, let's bundle together with 2 of the materials 2 golden threads, and with 2 of the materials we'll bundle together 1 golden thread, so that would be 6, right? 2 and 2 is 4, plus another 2 is 6, so we would get 6, but then it wouldn't be equally distributed among the 4 bundles. Vasisa shiu kol asios of shavos. But as we learned at the end of the daf yesterday, that it says Vasisa, you should make them that everything should be evenly distributed, not 2, 2, 1, 1. So therefore, it must be that it's 4 threads of gold. So you have 28 total threads in the threads of the choshen and the ephod. Interesting stuff, right? Let's go weiter. Hamrachba Amar Rav Yehuda. Hamakorea big day kiuna. Says Rachba in the name of Rav Yehuda, that somebody who tears up priestly garments, loket malchus. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, lo yikareya, that it may not be torn. Maskef Ravacha bar Yaakov, says Ravacha bar Yaakov, v'dilma achi kam rachman. Maybe this is what the pasuk is saying. Naivid le safa, that you should make a hem around the priestly garments, kihechi dilo nikra, so that they don't get torn. But it's not saying don't tear them, and if you do, we're going to whack you. Miksiv shelo yikareya, to which the Gemara says, it doesn't say shelo yikareya, right? The pasuk doesn't say so that it shouldn't get torn. No, it says lo yikareya, which is nif, also means it shouldn't get torn, but the Gemara wants to say what it means. Lo, don't. Don't tear the garments. And if you do, whack. Amr Belazar, says Belazar, Hamaziach choshen me'al ha'ephod. If somebody loosens the choshen from the ephod was the apron, right? That the Kohen Gadol would wear. Now the apron had these two straps that would go up the back of the Kohen Gadol and over his shoulders. And on each, at the end, there were like two stones. I think the names of the Bnei Yisrael were etched into them. Now, there were also rings on the ephod. And by way of those rings, the choshen would be secured into place. So, where am I? Amar Belazar, Amazeach choshen me'al ha'ephod. So somebody who loosens the choshen from the ephod, from the rings of the ephod, v'ameser b'adei aron, or somebody who removes the poles from the aron, right? The aron, of course, had these like tubes almost on the side, and you would slip the poles through these tubes, these like cylinder things, and that's where right, and that's how you would carry the aron. So somebody who removes the poles from the aron, loke, whack. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, lo yizach v'lo yasuru, that do not loosen the choshen from the ephod, and do not remove the poles from the aron. Maskav Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov asked the same question like he asked a minute ago regarding tearing the clothing of the Kohanim. To which Rav Acha bar Yaakov suggests, well, maybe all the pasuk is saying is, make them tight, right? Secure the choshen tight. Secure the poles tightly, fit into the tubes so that nothing moves around, so that the choshen is tightly fastened, so that the poles don't slip out. But it's not saying that if you remove them or loosen them, then whack. To which the Gemara says, well, it doesn't say in the pasuk shelo yizach v'shelo yasru, so that it doesn't move or so that it doesn't get removed. No, it says lo yizach, lo yasru, don't move them. And so there you go, don't move them. And if you do, whack. Rabbi Yossi Rab Chanina Rami Ksiv. Rabbi Yossi Rab Chanina asked the following question: that the pasuk says v'taba'osa aron yu abadim lo yasru mimenu. So on the one hand, we have a pasuk that says that the poles of the aron are in the tubes on the side of the aron, do not remove them. And yet we have another pasuk that says that you will put the poles into the rings, into these tubes on the outside of the aron. So we see that the poles do go in and out, right? Because we say, put them in, implying that they can come in and out. Okay, Tzad, so what's the deal? Misparkin vein nishmatin. So interesting. So Rashi explains what this means is that the poles of the aron, ki'ilu, they would get thicker towards the end. So ki'ilu, you would be able to take them in and out, but they wouldn't be able to slip out because they would be getting, at a certain point, they would get too thick and they couldn't get through the tubes. Interesting. Tanin Amiyachi, we talk in a brayso like this, Betaba so aron yu abadim, that in the rings of the aron will be the poles. Yachalo yu zazim b'mkomun, is it possible that they mamish don't move? Tamlom v'evesa es abadim b'tabos, that you put the poles in the rings. Right, meaning, so we see that they can come in and out. V'evesa es abadim yachol yu nichnosin v'yotzin. Well, if we have this pasuk that you'll put the pole in the rings, well, maybe you could just, be able to slide them through. Tamlom v'tabos aron yu abadim. It says, no, you got to put the poles in the rings, kilu, and they stay dartin. No, okay, said, what's the deal? Misparkim vein nishmatin. It's like we said a minute ago. Basically, you can put in and remove the poles, but they get wider as they go on so that they don't just like slip right through. At a certain point, they will become secured when they get, when the thickness of the pole gets jammed into the ring. What does it mean that you'll make beams for the Mishkan standing cedar wood? That they stand the way that they grow. I don't know, the bottom at the bottom, the top at the top. Another explanation, omdim shma'amidin es tzipuyon, that you can like nail on the gold that plates them. Tavracher omdim shematomer avad sivra nuvatal sichuyon. Maybe you'll say, well, once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so then like nobody cares about these beams. Tamalomer omdim she'omdin la'olam la'omei olamim. That no, people will always care about these beams. Okay. So Amar B'cham B'Chanina Ma'idich as Big Day Asrad L'Sharis B'Kodesh. It's the pasuk points out that there is something called Big Day Asrad. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the Big Day Asrad I think are generally understood to be the cases that the Klei Yashari is going to, but the Gemara wants to make a drasha that says, what is this Big Day Asrad? Listen up. Ilmale Big Day Kahuna L'Nishtay Misonen Sh'Yisrael Saru D'Ufalat. If not for the Big Day Kahuna, for the priestly garments, i.e., and for the priests who use these priestly garments in order to offer korbanos, to atone for our sins and to protect the Yidden, so there wouldn't be any remaining Yidden. Kilu, it's the Big Day Asrad, it's these Big Day Kahuna, it's the Avod of the Kohanim and all of that stuff that keeps us going. And I guess nowadays in Neshama Farim Sfasenu, our Tfilis, maybe take the place. I said that. Nobody else said that. So if it's wrong, I'm wrong. Let's go weiter. Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani Omar Diver Bishmal Tana, says Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani that it was taught in the Beis Medrash by Bishmal Begadim Shegordon Osan Kivriyasan Michlein. All right, that what's this Big Day Srad? It's these the kalim, the garments of the Kohanim, that they would take them right off the loom and they were kind of ready to go. They wouldn't have to fit them at all. And beside the man klumen, they would leave over a shtickle. Mahi, what's the shtickle? Rish Lakish Amar Elu Maisei Machat. Okay, Rish Lakish says it was certain threads that they would sew. Meis Fei Akasha. How could it be that there were certain threads that they would sew? Big Day Kuna Ein Osan Maisei Machat El Maisei Oreg. We have a bryce that says that the priestly garments were not sewn; they were woven. Shneimar, as the puzzle says, Maisei Oreg. It's got to be woven. Abai had gesagt that what's the part that was sewn? The part that was sewn was the sleeve. Kedutani, as we learn in the Brisa, that the sleeve of the priestly garments, they were woven on their own and then sewn together and attached to the rest of the garment, and it would go until their hand. Alright, so I guess that they would be allowed to weave the sleeves apart from the rest of the garment and then sew them together. Sounds fun. Omar Rachbe, Omar Rav Yehuda, says Rachbe the name of Rav Yehuda, Shalosh Aronis Asa B'Tzalel Emtzai Shel Eitz Tisha Pnimi Shel Zav Shmona Chitzon Asara V'Mashehu. Chevre, this is really interesting stuff. How was the Aron constructed? The Aron was made out of, I believe it was atzeshitim, made out of wood, but it was completely covered in gold. How did you cover the wood in gold? Basically, the Aron was created out of wood. It was like an open box, right? It was like imagine a wooden box with the top open, no lid. And how would they cover it in gold? They would cover it in gold by creating two more boxes. One that would go inside the wooden box and one that would go outside of the wooden box. So memele, all you would see is the gold. That's how so it was basically three boxes. So now says the Gemara, Shalish Aronis Asa B'Tzalel. B'Tzalel, of course, the architect of the Mishkan, the namesake of my alma mater. Emtzai Shel Eitz Tisha. So it says in the says Rachba in the name of Rav Yehuda that B'Tzalel made three Arons, basically three boxes for the Aron. The middle one was the wooden one, and that at a height of 9 tfachim. Pnimi shel zav shmona, and then there was a box inside of that one, made out of gold, and it had a height of 8 tfachim because the bottom of the wooden one also had a height of 1 tefach. So basically, to fill it up, you need a inner box with a height of 8 tfachim. Chitzon asar v'mashu, and the outer box was made out of gold, and it had a height of 10 tfachim. That's because the outer box, according to this, is this a brisa or is this just Rachman the name of Rav Yehuda? That the outer box was made out of gold, and its bottom was not a tefach thick. It was just a mashu thick. And then the height was 10 tefachim, 9 to cover the height of the wooden box, and then an additional tefach to cover the thickness of the kaporos, the lid of the aron. Vatanya agadatas over mashu. But 1 second, don't we have a verse that says that the outer box was actually 11 tefachim and a little bit? Lokasha command yesh bov tefach or command ain bov tefach. To which the Gemara says, well, yeah, it just depends if you say that the bottom of the outer box had a thickness of a tefach. If it did have a thickness of a tefach, so then the height was 11 and a bit. If it didn't have a thickness of a tefach at the bottom of the outer box, so then the total height was 10 and a little bit. Umay mashu zer. If you say that the bottom of the outer one had a tefach and the height was 11 tefachim and a little bit, so what's that little bit? It's for the crown that was at the top of the aron that surrounded it. All right, sounds fun. Amar Yochanan shlosha zirim hein. Says Rabbi Yochanan that there were 3 crowns in the context of the vessels of the base of the Mishkan. Shal mizbeach v'shal aron v'shal shulchan. There was a crown on the mizbeach, a crown on the aron, and a crown on the shulchan. Interesting. Shal mizbeach zocha aharon u'nitalo. So Aharon was zoche to the crown of the mizbeach. He's the Kohen Gadol. Shal shulchan zocha David u'nitalo. The crown of the shulchan, David HaMelech merited it. Right, the shulchan is associated with malachim, with king, with rulership, and David was zocha to the crown of the shulchan. Shel aron adayin munachu kol harotze likach yovo v'yikach. The crown of the aron, which Rashi points out, is keneged Torah. Right, we said that the crown of the aron is keneged kahuna, and the crown of the shulchan is malchus. The crown of the aron is Torah. And says the Gemara, Adayin munachu, it's still available. It hasn't been taken by Aaron or by David or by anybody. The crown of the Torah is still available. Anybody who wants is free to come and take the crown of the Torah. Maybe you'll say that maybe the crown of the Torah is not on as high of a level as the crown of the aron and the shulchan that were taken by Aharon and David, respectively. Therefore, the pasuk says that in me, kings will become kinged, right? And as Rashi points out, that it's sort of a higher level to be able to anoint the king than to be the king, right? You have to be on a higher level than the king in order to appoint someone and make someone into king. And therefore, right, the pasuk says that in the Torah, the kings rule, and therefore the Torah is actually higher than the crown of kingship and the crown of kahuna. And it's free for the taking. Rabbi Yochanan has the following kasha ksiv zar v'korinan zer. The pasuk, this word crown is written zayin resh, which means zar, foreign, and zer, but we read it zer, which is a crown. Zocha naisis lo zer, lo zocha zare menu. If a fellow studies Torah and he or she merits, so then it becomes a crown. However, if they do not merit, it's forgotten. It becomes foreign to them. Rabbi Yochanan has the following kasha ksiv asisu l'cha aron eitz. On the one hand, the pasuk says you will make for yourself, that you got to do the work yourself. You got to make for yourself an aron out of wood. And then we have another pasuk that says that they will make the aron. So on the one hand, we have a pasuk that says, Moshe, you have to do the work. On the other hand, we have a pasuk that says other people will do the work. You hear that? Good gig. We learn from here that a Talmud Chacham, the people in his city, have to do his work for him. That sounds very nice. Very interesting. Alright. It sounds very nice. And then I guess he could just learn. That sounds nice. You gotta cover the aron in gold, inside and outside. Amarava kol Talmud Chacham shein tocho kivaro eino Talmud Chacham. Says Rava that any Torah scholar whose insides is not like his outsides, he's not genuine, he's not transparent, well then he's not really a Talmid Chacham. Wow. Abai B'Tema Rabbi Bar Ula Nikras Nisav. He's called Epis, what's the word for that? I feel like it's a word that has like a G. I almost feel like it's like expungiate. It's probably not a word, but like repugnant, pungent. What's the word that like disgusting, vile? No, not disgusting or vile, but I don't know. What do you want me to tell you? Nisav. I don't know. Bad. Shnei Amar. Af ki nisav v'nelach ish shosa kamayim avla. That somebody who's like, I don't know what the word is. Alright. Akoponim. So somebody who's like really chaval. So that's a fellow who drinks the waters of crookedness. The waters referring to the waters of Torah. Called tzamei l'chulamayim, and but he's crooked about it. Omer Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani, Reb Yonasan, "Ma'id chsiv lama ze mechir biad ksil liknos chachma v'leiv ayin." How come a fool should waste his money to try to purchase wisdom when he doesn't even have the heart to be able to understand the wisdom? Very interesting pasuk. Ki'ilu, some people are just wasting their time trying to buy wisdom. They can't handle the wisdom. Woe is to the Talmidei Chacham she'oskim b'Torah v'ein bo'en yiras shamayim. Woe is to people who spend time studying Torah and they don't even have fear of God. Machaz Rabbi Yanai would announce, and we learned this Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, and it stuck with me. It's a gewaldige line. Chaval al deleis le'darta v'sar le'darta yovid. Woe, it's chaval for a person who doesn't even have a chatzer, doesn't have a courtyard, and yet he makes a gate for the courtyard that he doesn't even have. It's like one step at a time. Get your priorities in order. If you don't have a courtyard, you don't need to put up a gate. And therefore, Rashi explains this as saying, look, the ikr here is yiras shamayim. The ikr here is get to a point where we have a fear of God. Now, if you don't have the whole point of the Torah is as an entryway towards fearing God. And if you don't cultivate fear of God, what are you learning Torah for? Interesting. Amlu Rava l'Rabbanon. Rava said to the rabbis, please fellows, lo tirsun trei gehenim, do yourselves a favor and do not inherit two hells. Meaning, if you spend your whole life over here on this world, when you could be having a good time and, doing whatever you want, and you spend your time studying Torah all day, and you're missing out on life in this world, on having a good time over here, and you also don't have yiras shamayim, and therefore you're not really going to get anywhere in the world to come, so what do you have? You got nothing. If you're not going to have yiras shamayim, you may as well have a good time over here. So therefore, I don't think that Rava is suggesting that we just don't have yiras shamayim and don't do anything. I think what he's saying is have yiras shamayim and study Torah. But if all you're going to do is, sit in the Beis HaMedrash all day studying Torah, and you're not going to have yiras shamayim, so what's the point? You got nothing in this world because you could have been having fun, and in the end you were just studying all day, and you didn't even get yiras shamayim. So then in the next world, you're not really going to get too far either. So you're just going to lose out double. This is the Torah that Moshe sam, that he placed. But sam, what's a sam? If he merits, so it becomes an elixir of life. If a fellow doesn't merit, he doesn't learn Torah Lishma, so then it becomes an elixir of death. This is what Rava says. Somebody who's skillful with the Torah and he learns it, Lishma, so then it's an elixir of life. But if he's not skillful with it and he doesn't, learn Torah Lishma, so then it's an elixir of death. Reb Yonasan Rami. Reb Yonasan asked the following kasha. On the one hand, we have a pasuk that says that the Torah makes a fellow happy. It says that the words of God are tzrufa. They're like a fire that like burns. Well, if he merits, so then he'll be happy from the Torah. If he doesn't merit, somebody learns Shalom Lishma, so he'll get burnt and what's the word, like it's like silver or whatever. You like put it into really hot fire and it like melts it and shapes it. So if you're not zoche, that's gonna happen to you. Rish Lakish Amar Migufa Dikra Nafka. Rish Lakish says you can actually just learn everything out from that second pasuk of Imras Hashem Tzrufa. Zachat Tzarafta L'chaim, Zachat Tzarafta L'misa. If a fellow merits, so then the Torah will shape him for life. If he doesn't merit, so then it will shape him for death. Yiras Hashem Torah, or like burn him to death, because Yiras Hashem Torah Omedes La'ad, the fear of God is pure, and it stands forever. Amr Reb Chanina Za'alomi Torah B'Tayreh. Says Reb Chanina, this is a fellow who studies Torah in purity. Mai, what's the purity? No seisha v'chakach lomet Torah. A fellow who first gets married and then he studies Torah, so that he's not distracted by any other desires. He can just focus on his Torah. Eidus Hashem ne'emana. The testimony of the Eibishter is trustworthy. It is trustworthy to testify about those who study, that the Torah is going to say, oh yeah, that fellow, he studied Torah. Or that fellow, she studied Torah. So it says that that certain articles in the Mishkan were made of embroidery. But we also say that some of them were made out of choshev. I don't know, consideration. Let's say. So it says it means at first they would sort of consider the part where they were going to embroider. They would kind of make an outline, and then they would embroider where they outlined. Tana Mishmid of Nehemiah, who was taught by the Besmedrish of Nehemiah. Roke maise machat lefichach partzuf echad choshev maise oreg lefichach shnei partzufin. They taught by the Besmedrish of Nehemiah that rokem, embroidering, was on one side. So you basically have the same image on both sides. Whereas weaving, somehow they would be able to weave in to these like curtains and things, actually two different like images on either side. So on one side it could be like a lion, on the other side it could be like an eagle, as Rashi points out. That is the weaving. Chever, that was daf Ayin Beis of Masechta Yoma. I think it was a pretty interesting daf, right? The first part of the daf, we discussed the different articles of the Big Day Kahuna and how many threads they were comprised of. And then we got into some interesting agadatas about like Talmidei Chacham, studying Torah. Chaval Deleis Leidarta V'Sar Leidarta Ovid. Interesting line. But Chever, I hope you enjoyed daf Ayin Beis. I hope you enjoy your day. Cheers, friends.